Hey everyone, the purpose of today's video is to look at some examples where we need to evaluate expressions for given variables. Okay, so let's dive into this example here. We are given the fact that x equals -2, y equals 3, and z equals -5. And then we need to evaluate this expression for those given values of x, y, and z. So here's what we need to do. Let's start by taking each of the values that we know and we substitute them in for the variable that we see in the expression. So instead of x, I'm now going to use -2. So I'm going to do -2 squared. And now instead of y, I'm going to use 3. All right, and instead of z, I'm going to use -5. So I just replaced x, y, and z with their values that were listed up above. And now all we need to do is simplify this expression, but pay attention to the order of operations when we do so. All right, order of operations tells us that in this expression we have exponents, we have multiplication, we have an exponent here, we have multiplication, and we have addition. So between those three operations, what comes first is our exponent. So -2 squared means we have to do -2 times itself twice. So -2 times -2. And then we're multiplying that by -3, and we'll still add -5 at the end. -2 times -2 is a +4 times 3 plus -5. And 4 times 3 is 12, and then we add -5 to that, and 12 plus -5 is 7. So we just solved or simplified this expression for these given values of x. Alright, let's try another one. Let's try evaluating this expression right here. You'll see these sometimes. So this is the absolute value of x times y times z. So what we need to do for this one is substitute in our value of x, y, and z in for our variables. So the absolute value of, instead of x, we're going to use -2. And then for y, we'll substitute in 3. And for z, we substitute -5. Alright, now we have absolute value symbols here. What we need to do is simplify everything within there first. And then we find the absolute value of our answer. So I'm going to do -2 times 3 is -6. All right, and I'm going to bring down the rest. -6 times -5 is a +30. And I've still got my absolute value symbol, and now I need to figure out the absolute value of 30, which is just 30. So the absolute value of x times y times z is 30. Alright, let's look at one final example here. We have x cubed plus y times z. So what we need to do for this one is start by substituting in what we know. So instead of x, we put -2, and I'm going to cube that. Plus, instead of y, I'm using 3, and instead of z, I'm using -5. Alright, order of operations tells me I need to take care of doing my exponents first. So -2 to the third power actually means that we're doing -2 times itself 3 times. So I'm doing -2 times -2 times -2. And then to that answer, I'm going to add the product of 3 and -5. Okay, so let's just kind of break this down into pieces here. -2 times -2 is a +4. And then +4 times a -2 is a -8. Okay, so -2 times -2 times -2 is -8. Then I'm just going to bring the rest of this down. -8 plus, and I can go ahead and simplify this piece right away. 3 times -5 is -15. And my final step is just to add -8 plus -15, and we know that when we do that, we get an answer of -23. Alright, if you want to stick with me and try a couple sample problems, I will put some on the screen here for you. And then you can pause, try it, and check your answers when you're done. Alright, did you give them a shot? Let's see how you did. So for A, I have negative x, which is 4, plus y times z. So negative 2 times negative 3. And this becomes negative 4 plus, I have to do my multiplication here, negative 2 times negative 3 is 6. And then negative 4 plus 6 is a positive 2. So for A, the answer is 2. For B, we have to do x times y, so 4 times negative 2, and I'm going to square that answer, plus z, which is negative 3. Alright, so I'm doing 4 times negative 2 first, because that's in parentheses. 4 times negative 2 is negative 8. And then I'm going to square that and add negative 3. Well, negative 8 squared, remember, is negative 8 times negative 8. So that's 64 plus negative 3. And remember, adding a negative is just like subtracting, so I can think of that as 64 minus 3. And I get an answer of 61. And our last one here, we have the absolute value of x plus y plus z. So we have 4 plus negative 2 plus negative 3. I'm going to simplify what's in here first and then find the absolute value of it. So negative 4 and negative 2 is, 4 plus negative 2 is 2. And 2 plus negative 3 is negative 1. And I need to find the absolute value of negative 1, which is simply 1. So there you have it, guys. Check with me as always. If you have further questions, we can go through more practice together. Hope this helps. Have a good night.